We have a challenge before us right now. This has been a whirlwind change of events across our country. Everything from the debacle that we saw with President Biden's poor performance debate that really revealed, I think, what many Americans already knew to be true. The vice president who is with him every day, there's no way in the world she did not see this coming. She was untruthful when she went out and told people repeatedly that he's the sharpest man in the room. Tragically, this last month, we saw an American lose their life shielding his daughters just because he went to a political rally to support his candidate of choice. That should never happen.
When I joined AMAC, I took a pledge.
When I joined AMAC, I took a pledge.
I took a pledge.
When I joined AMAC, I took a pledge to love our country.
Join AMAC and the over 2 million fellow American patriots and take that pledge today.
Hello, everyone. You're watching AMAC's Better for America podcast. Joining me now is Congressman Zach Nunn. He is serving Iowans in the 3rd Congressional District. Now, Congressman Nunn served our country for almost 2 decades in the United States Air Force, and as an airborne intelligence officer, he flew recon missions off the coasts of Russia and China. And then, after 9/11, he deployed 3 times to the Middle East and flew over 700 combat hours. Congressman Nunn served as Director of Cybersecurity at the White House's National Security Council, combating cyber attacks from foreign adversaries. And he also helped to pass the state's largest tax cuts 3 times over, growing Iowa's economy and putting more money back in the pockets of Iowans. Congressman Nunn, welcome to Better for America. I'm thrilled to have you with me today.
Well, hey, I'm so honored to be with you and for your millions of listeners and guests here. This is a great opportunity to share what we're doing in Washington, but most importantly, continue to hear from folks like my home state of Iowa on how we can be better servants for them in doing good policy here in their capital.
Well, that's terrific. You know, today, sir, so many people there's been such a whirlwind of activity really over the last couple of weeks, and folks are really focused on the changes that we're seeing unfold at the White House. Biden has officially dropped out, and Kamala Harris now looks like the nominee. My question for you is, how do you feel about the Democrat Party for the first time really in history endorsing a nominee that wasn't chosen by the American people?
Look, I'm from a state called Iowa. We are pretty good at welcoming folks who are in the business of politics to come and actually talk to Iowans, sit around a kitchen table, come to a farm, join us at the state fair. The reality is Iowa has long time been a partner in helping vet these candidates so that they have a responsibility to come out, hear from folks, and that's what our caucus is all about. And you'll remember, Kamala, the candidate for president, didn't even make it as far as Iowa before she was, beaten out, in this case, by then President Joe Biden. We have a challenge before us right now. This has been a whirlwind change of events across our country. Everything from the debacle that we saw with President Biden's poor performance debate that really revealed, I think, what many Americans already knew to be true, that he was having a hard time continuing as commander-in-chief, let alone candidate and standard bearer for the Democratic Party. A near assassination attempt on former President Trump, and just the colossal failure that we have seen this week in Washington with Secret Service being unable to protect. And now we have another chapter in this. We have, a Democrat who had 14 million votes for Joe Biden in the primary, give that up after 50 million Americans saw him fail on television, and now a no primary, no contest candidate is replacing him in Kamala Harris. It is going to be a long road ahead. It is 4 months before the election, but the American people have a lot of questions for Vice President Harris and really what she would try to bring to the table as the Democrat standard bearer.
You know, it seems for years that Kamala Harris had to know about Biden's competency or lack thereof to serve as president. And, if he can't run for re-election, should he resign today? And I guess
Absolutely.
What our members are asking is this a Kamala cover-up?
Well, this is one of the things we called out immediately. America got to see 90 minutes of Joe Biden at his worst, which may have been his best. The reality is the vice president who is with him every day, there's no way in the world she did not see this coming. She was untruthful when she went out and told people repeatedly that he's the sharpest man in the room. If that was really the case, then I think that says a lot about the Biden administration overall. The other aspect of this is we are at a point now where, I called on the president to resign. If he can't run for office, if he can't be held competent to stand a trial, then he should not be the individual who's our commander-in-chief in charge of the nuclear codes and deterring our greatest foreign adversaries. I don't know that Kamala Harris has been able to do much more in this area. I mean, she's had one job as vice president, and that's to secure the border. The result is 3 years on, 8 million illegals in all of our communities, displacing fellow veterans from shelter homes so that illegals can be in our country. This is a very concerning aspect. And today, we're going to hear from the Prime Minister of Israel, who's fighting against a terrorist group, Hamas, that currently has Americans as hostages. And the Vice President of the United States, who is also the President of the Senate, Kamala Harris, won't even show up to be present to receive a foreign leader and one of our strongest allies in the Middle East, Israel. Turning our back on Israel by this vice president, I think, is very indicative of the type of foreign policy that she is going to be leading if she receives the Democratic nomination.
Yeah. Wow. Unbelievable, really. Now, following the Trump assassination attempt, the majority of Americans and our members, they have been left really in a state of shock and fear for the future. And it seems that there's such a lack of concern among some leftists, really, regarding the assassination attempt. It was so deeply concerning. Earlier this week, we watched the Secret Service Director, Kimberly Cheadle, step down, as we think she should have. But what changes really need to be proposed to improve protocols? And who and how should those who allowed this to happen be held accountable?
Look, I think we need a transformation of how we hold people accountable first and foremost in Washington, D.C. As a combat veteran from multiple tours in Afghanistan, the failure that resulted in the loss of life of 13 brave Americans defending our rearguard, including one from my district, those senior leaders have never been held accountable. Tragically, this last month we saw an American lose their life shielding his daughters just because he went to a political rally to support his candidate of choice. That should never happen. And the Secret Service is not just there to guard the president, it's there to protect the American way of life, our democracy. The failures that we saw, particularly those at the top of the Secret Service, as was demonstrated by the director's large callousness and incompetence on just answering basic level questions from members of Congress, mind you, after she'd already given interviews to folks like ABC on what she thought might happen, are a travesty. And they do a disservice to the shielded officers on the front line who literally put their body in harm's way to protect President Trump after an assassin's bullet grazed his head. Yeah. Equally important, I think we need to reform how we're doing things here in Washington. It begins with things like taking the Secret Service out of the Department of Homeland Security, and I think put them back where they belong, under Treasury, where they have greater autonomy and responsibility to execute. Also, we have seen just a bloating of the federal government, particularly under the Biden administration. Look, I'm from a farm state like Iowa, but the U.S. Department of Agriculture only has 11% of its workforce returning to work. Most of them are still working remote. If they can function with 11% in D.C., then send those other 80% of public taxpayer-funded employees out to places like Iowa and the Midwest where we need a functioning Department of Ag. This is just one example of a government in D.C. that has gone far too cozy being in the swamp and needs to get back to places like the heart of the heartland to help start taking care of Americans.
Right, taking care of people. This is always what happens when government gets too big and too powerful. They want to take over more and really suffers the people. Those are really terrific solutions. But Congressman, I do want to shift and talk just a little bit more about national security, both abroad and here at home. You've introduced a new bill to fight against China's aggression and create transparency for local law enforcement on our threats to national security. Tell us a little bit about your bill and how it ensures that local law enforcement agencies don't rely on technology manufactured by companies tied to communist China.
Well, there's nothing more American than being able to produce something that's here in America for Americans. We have presented a raft of really good solutions, we believe. I serve on the China Commission. First and foremost is this baseline. It's called the Clarity Act, and what it does is it makes sure that the bedrock of American networks, everything from local law enforcement's communications equipment to how we do investigations, are protecting Americans' privacy and supporting our law enforcement. Unfortunately, the Chinese are aggressively trying to get into this, foundational element of our cyber infrastructure in a way called blockchain. And I know that's an esoteric term for many of us right now, but right now the level of artificial intelligence, of research being done, China is trying to bring more of that back home. We saw what it did with a platform called TikTok, a social media element whose parent company was owned by ByteDance, a Chinese wholly owned subsidiary. That information flows back to Beijing, and it's a direct targeting tool. I know this as a counterintelligence officer for nearly 20 years to go after key elements within America. We have got to be able to protect ourselves on this front. It's the same reason I'm leading legislation to stop China from buying farmland right here in the United States. The same reason I've helped shut down and go after 40,000 shell companies being operated by the Chinese on U.S. soil. It's the same reason that I'm pushing so hard for the Biden administration to enforce sanctions. They're allowing Iran to sell $80 billion primarily to China to fuel China at undercut rates, and that money comes directly back to Hamas, Hezbollah, and Houthis, who are taking shots at U.S. forces right now. We lost 3 American troops just this year from an attack that resulted from money coming from Iran's illicit oil sales to China. We've got to be able to get our arms around this and stand up to one of our near-peer adversaries emerging in the Indo-PACOM theater.
Yes, we cannot underestimate the China threat. It is real. It seems the Biden-Harris team has for years, and I'm relieved to hear that you've got some really great solutions on the table. And another national security threat, sir, is the increasing use of legal systems against political figures and ordinary Americans. We can't forget that there are ordinary Americans who support folks like Donald Trump who are facing prison time. What measures do you support to ensure that these processes are fair and not politically motivated? I don't think we're talking enough about this.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's one of the ways that, as an intelligence officer, I leaned in so heavily to be able to reform FISA and take away some of these horrible things that were being done, particularly by members of the Department of Justice who were using government resources to target U.S. citizens. And there was very little accountability for these individuals. We had a number at the Federal Bureau of Investigation who had been using it, who were never held accountable when they were identified. There was no law on the books to prosecute them. Simply said, unacceptable. These things have to be able to have trust in our federal government. We also need to make sure that we are going and putting a higher threshold out there for American citizens. It's one of the reasons that I push so hard for FISA to be reformed and making sure that we have folks who are U.S. citizens who don't have a lower threshold than an illegal who comes into our country and has greater protection on U.S. soil. It's also one of the reasons that the guy who helped fly Overwatch on one of the strikes against terrorist groups like the Soleimani strike that took out one of Iran's most lethal operators of the Iran Revolutionary Guards Corps, we were able to stop that by using intelligence the right way. And so I want to make sure that our overseas intelligence collection is focused on our bad adversaries so we can not only get ahead of this, but that we also protect Americans here on U.S. soil before they get to U.S. soil.
And they are. People are coming across our border in droves. This is a national security threat. Our border must be secure in order for us to have a country. And a lot of AMAC members are very concerned about the potential of illegals voting in our presidential election. It seems that the left is doing everything in their power to they're even coming out and saying, yes, let illegal citizens choose who the next president will be. What measures need to be put in place so that we can ensure that we have free and fair elections?
Well, I'll say 3 things first. 1, I've been to the southern border repeatedly. I've been on military tours in support of defending the southern border. We have too many illegals, 8 million who came across, and they are now in our country. Hundreds of those on a terrorist watch list. It is a clear and present threat to the United States. We have to stop the illegal border surge into the United States. 2, once they get here, identifying and preventing them from doing the kinds of things that truly harm this country, including things like voting in local municipality elections. It's one of the reasons that I help champion the SAVE Act to make sure that only U.S. citizens can vote in elections. It's already the law of the land, but clearly laws of the land like don't come to the country illegally are not being enforced by this administration. It is important that we be clear that even if you come into this country and in a place like California, you get a social security card, a driver's license, benefits, you don't get on a voter roll and think that you can vote in a federal election for our president of the United States. It cannot happen. And then 3, we need to have just a reform on how we do overall immigration. There are great people who want to come to this country. They'll be some of the best Americans who ever had the opportunity. Those who want to do it the right way, though, and are doing it, are being pushed back to the back of the line repeatedly. We have to have an on-ramp here, so whether you're a seasonal worker who wants to work in ag, or whether you're a professional worker, as Donald Trump has said, who wants to come here and get an education, we should be using that expertise here in the United States if you qualify. These are important things not only to keep America, strategically in the advantage seat, but to clamp down on the illegal immigration while finding a smart pathway for immigrants who want to come here in a way that's been approved by our government.
Very good. Congressman Zach Nunn, could you share with our Iowan AMAC members how they can follow you or sign up for your newsletter?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have great service here. Please check us out at zachnunn.com. There you'll get to know a little bit more about me. You can also check us out on our official site. We're on social media, everything but TikTok, of course. But check us out on Facebook, on Instagram, and you can find us there under Congressman Zach Nunn, N-U-N-N. Great opportunity. Mainly, I want to hear from you, particularly if you're an AMAC member. Even more if you're from Iowa, you can visit us in person. We have 3 field offices. They're fully manned. We have a large district, 21 counties, and we do listening sessions in all of those 21 counties. So come out, talk to us in person, or reach out to us next time you're visiting the Capital Region.
That's terrific. We'll be sure to connect our grassroots AMAC members, our feet on the street, with your office. Sir, thank you so much for all of the great work that you're doing. Keep up the good work. God bless you, and thanks again for being with me.
Thank you very much for what you guys do. And to all of the AMAC members out there listening, it's so important not only that you share your voice, but tee up your priorities. Together, we get the opportunity not only to defend this country, but to keep it the greatest country in the world. I really appreciate all you guys do.
Amen. Thank you so much. And to all of you out there listening, thanks for tuning in. Have a great day, everyone.
When I joined AMAC, I took a pledge.
When I joined AMAC, I took a pledge.
I took a pledge.
I took a pledge.
When I joined AMAC, I took a pledge to love our country.
Join AMAC and the over 2 million fellow American patriots and take that pledge today.